Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're diving into a book that I think a lot of you are going to be really interested in. We're going to be talking about Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood, a book that was huge in Japan
It really was.
and continues to be really popular and resonate with readers all over the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a coming-of-age story, but it's so much more than that. It's about love and loss and mental health and finding your way in a world that can just feel both beautiful and really heartbreaking at the same time.
You know what's fascinating about Norwegian Wood is that it really explores these huge, very universal themes, but within a very specific context,
Yeah.
like 1960s Japan,
Right.
a time of really immense social change and a lot of student unrest.
Yeah.
So that backdrop kind of adds this other layer to the whole story,
Yeah.
highlighting these characters' struggles to find their place in a world that's rapidly shifting.
Yeah, you have this backdrop of a society that's really grappling with its own identity, and then you have these characters like Toru Watanabe, our protagonist, who are also just trying to figure out who they are and where they belong.
Exactly. And Toru's journey is really like the heart of the novel. We follow him as he kind of navigates all the complexities of his relationships with two very different women. Naoko, the girlfriend of his deceased best friend, who's very fragile, and then Midori, this really vibrant and quirky force of nature.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty,
Sure.
can you give us a quick overview of like the main themes that Murakami is exploring in Norwegian Wood?
Absolutely. So the novel really delves deeply into these themes of grief and loss,
Might take me there.
particularly surrounding suicide. And it explores the impact of trauma on individuals and their relationships. We also see themes of sexuality and coming of age, with Toru navigating his desires and trying to understand intimacy. And I think underlying all of this, there's this really profound sense of searching for identity, for meaning, for connection in a world that can feel very isolating.
So with that framework in mind,
Yeah.
let's dive into the story itself. The novel opens with Toru, now 37, hearing the Beatles song Norwegian Wood on a plane, which triggers this really powerful flashback to his university days in 1969.
It's such a key scene because it immediately establishes memory and music as these really powerful forces in the novel.
Right.
And it sets the tone for Toru's journey back into his past, a past marked by both joy and this immense sorrow.
Yeah, and that sorrow is centered around the suicide of Toru's best friend Kizuki,
Right.
which happens right at the start of the book.
Right at the beginning.
And this event casts a long shadow over the entire narrative,
Oh, absolutely.
shaping Toru's relationships with Naoko and Midori.
It's a catalyst for so much of what unfolds.
Yeah.
Kizuki's death leaves this void in Toru's life, and it also throws Naoko into this deep emotional crisis,
Right.
leading her to withdraw from the world and then eventually seek refuge in a sanatorium.
Yeah, there's this really poignant passage early on where Toru and Naoko are in a coffee shop just trying to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But the silences between them are so heavy, filled with this unspoken grief and the awkwardness of trying to connect after just such a profound loss. It really sets the stage for their complicated relationship.
Yeah, that scene perfectly captures the way that shared trauma can both bind people together, but also create this almost insurmountable barrier to communication.
Right.
They're drawn to each other for solace, but the weight of Kazuki's death is just hanging over them,
Yeah.
making genuine intimacy so difficult.
And it's in this really emotionally charged atmosphere
Yeah.
that we meet Nagasawa, Toru's enigmatic friend from university.
Right.
He's brilliant, he's worldly, he's cynical.
He is.
He's such a stark contrast to both Toru and Kazuki.
Nagasawa represents a different path for Toru, one that's focused on intellectual pursuits, casual relationships, and a
Yeah.
real detachment from emotions.
Right.
He's a fascinating character because he challenges Toru's worldview and introduces him to all these new experiences.
Yeah.
But there's also this darkness to him that Toru finds both intriguing and unsettling.
Like the famous Nagasawa legend about him eating slugs.
Oh, yeah.
It's hilarious
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
bizarre.
It is.
But it also reveals a certain recklessness and a fascination with pushing boundaries.
Exactly. Nagasawa embodies this idea of escaping reality, whether it's through intellectualism or hedonism. He's constantly seeking distraction from the pain and the messiness of life,
Right.
which is a stark contrast to Toru grappling with grief and his attempts to connect genuinely with others.
So we have these three characters, Toru, Naoko, and Nagasawa,
Right.
all dealing with grief and the complexities of life in very different ways.
Yeah.
And then enters Midori,
Yeah. And then Midori,
who completely shakes things up.
she bursts into the story with this infectious energy and a completely unconventional outlook on life.
Right.
She's playful, she's direct, she's unafraid to express her desires, which is both refreshing and a bit challenging for Toru,
Yeah.
who's so accustomed to this somber atmosphere surrounding Naoko.
And she has this amazing sense of humor, often making these really quirky observations about everyday things, like her commentary on bras or egg fryers.
Yeah, she finds the absurdity in everything,
Yeah.
which is such a contrast to the heaviness of Toru's world.
Yeah, and that humor is essential
It is.
because it offers this counterpoint to the novel's darker themes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Midori represents a different way of coping with life's challenges. Finding joy in the mundane, embracing imperfections, and refusing to be defined by societal expectations.
Yeah.
There's this memorable scene where she and Toru are watching a fire from her laundry deck, drinking beer and singing.
Yeah.
She's almost captivated by the fire.
Mm.
And her reflections on death are so different from Toru's. It's just a really powerful moment that highlights their contrasting perspectives on life and mortality.
Absolutely. Midori's acceptance of life's impermanence stands in such stark contrast to Toru's struggle to come to terms with loss. And that scene really underscores the different paths they represent for Toru. Naoko with her fragility and retreat from the world, and Midori with her embrace of life's chaos and beauty.
And it's within this dynamic that Toru's internal conflict begins to take shape.
Yeah.
He's drawn to Midori's vibrancy, her zest for life, but he also feels this deep sense of responsibility towards Naoko,
Right.
who's clearly struggling.
And this is where the novel's exploration of love and duty becomes really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not a simple love triangle. It's about Toru grappling with the different ways that love can manifest and the sacrifices that it often demands.
Right.
He cares for Naoko deeply, but their relationship is rooted in shared grief and a sense of obligation.
Yeah.
With Midori, there's this spark of joy, a genuine connection that feels liberating.
Right.
But it forces him to confront his own desires and needs.
And this tension, this pull between these two very different forms of love only intensifies as the story unfolds.
It's a classic dilemma.
It is.
The heart wants what it wants, but sometimes duty and compassion pull us in a totally different direction. And Toru is caught right in the middle of it, trying to figure out who he is and where he belongs in this messy, beautiful, heartbreaking tapestry of life. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
As Toru kind of grapples with his feelings for both Naoko and Midori, we see him seeking solace in books.
Yeah.
Like, there's this passage where he talks about how reading just became his escape.
Right.
A way to create some distance from, the intensity of his emotions.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how Murakami uses literature as this motif throughout the novel.
All right.
Almost like a metaphor for the search for meaning and connection.
Yeah, it's like those books become a refuge for Toru, a place where he can process his thoughts and feelings
Yeah,
without the pressure of social interaction.
absolutely.
And it speaks to the power of literature to transport us, to offer different perspectives to help us make sense of our own lives.
Exactly. And as Toru delves deeper into these books, he's also trying to navigate the real world, which includes dealing with Naoko's deteriorating mental state. She eventually decides to seek treatment at a secluded sanatorium, hoping to find some peace and healing.
Yeah, the scenes in the sanatorium are some of the most powerful in the novel.
They are.
They're filled with this sense of quiet desperation and longing for connection.
Yeah.
When Toru visits Naoko, we meet Reiko, her roommate, who becomes a sort of mentor figure for both of them.
Right.
Reiko's wisdom and compassion, born from her own experiences with loss and mental illness, add another layer to the story.
Reiko's character is fascinating because she represents a different kind of resilience.
Yeah.
She's been through immense pain, but she's found a way to keep going,
Yeah.
to find meaning in helping others. Her story about her breakdown after a student becomes obsessed with her
Oh, yeah.
is particularly haunting. It reveals the emotional toll of caring for others and the lasting impact of trauma.
It also highlights that complex nature of mental illness and how it affects not just the individual, but also those around them. The sanatorium becomes like this microcosm of society, a place where people are grappling with their inner demons and trying to find a way to live with their deformities, as Reiko puts it.
That's such a powerful image, wearing your deformities in the open.
Yeah.
It speaks to the vulnerability and the shared humanity of those struggling with mental health, and it challenges societal notions of what's considered normal or acceptable.
So while Naoko is trying to heal in the sanatorium, Toru is navigating life in Tokyo.
Yeah.
His relationship with Midori continues to evolve. Their Sundays together, filled with cooking, exploring the city, and sharing their thoughts and dreams, offer a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere of the sanatorium.
It's almost as if Murakami is deliberately juxtaposing these two worlds, the quiet isolation of the sanatorium where time seems to stand still, and the bustling energy of Tokyo where life rushes forward.
Right.
Toru is caught between these two poles, trying to reconcile his feelings for both Naoko, who represents the past and the weight of grief,
Right.
and Midori, who embodies the present and the possibility of joy.
But even as Toru finds solace in Midori's company, the shadow of Naoko's illness looms large.
Absolutely.
And then comes the devastating news of her suicide.
Mm-hmm.
It's a turning point in the novel, shattering Toru's world and forcing him to confront the profound impact of loss and the fragility of life.
Murakami doesn't shy away from depicting the rawness of grief. The scene where Toru receives the news and the subsequent days are filled with a visceral sense of pain and disorientation.
Yeah.
It's as if the ground has shifted beneath him and he's left adrift, searching for some kind of anchor.
And in the aftermath of Naoko's death, it's Reiko who steps in to offer solace and understanding.
Right.
She travels to Tokyo to be with Toru, sharing stories about Naoko's final days and revealing the depth of her struggle to find peace.
Reiko's visit is crucial because it provides a sense of closure, both for Toru and for the reader.
Yeah.
We learn more about Naoko's inner world, her desperate yearning to break free from the past and find a sense of renewal. It's heartbreaking to realize how much she was carrying, how much pain she was trying to escape.
Yeah, and it also sheds light on the limitations of mental health treatment in that era and the societal stigma surrounding suicide.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that even with the best intentions, sometimes the pain is too great, and the systems in place aren't always enough to catch those who are falling.
And as Reiko prepares to leave Tokyo, she urges Toru to be happy.
Yeah.
A simple but profound message that really encapsulates the novel's central themes.
Right.
It's not about forgetting Naoko or dismissing the pain of her loss, but rather about finding a way to move forward to honor her memory by embracing life.
Reiko's words echo throughout the rest of the novel, almost as a guiding principle for Toru as he tries to piece his life back together.
Yeah.
And it's in this moment of profound loss and uncertainty that he finally reaches out to Midori, expressing his desire to connect, to start anew.
That final phone call to Midori is filled with a sense of hope and possibility.
Yeah.
It's a recognition that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can find a way to reach for connection, for love, for a glimmer of light in the midst of sorrow.
That ending always stays with me. The ambiguity of it, the sense of hope, but also uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like Murakami is leaving it up to us to imagine what becomes of Toru and Midori.
Right.
Do they find happiness together? Do they manage to navigate the complexities of their pasts and create a future that's full of light?
We don't know for sure.
Right.
And I think that's part of what makes Norwegian Wood so powerful.
Yeah.
It doesn't offer easy answers or tie everything up neatly.
Yeah.
It just leaves you pondering these big questions about lost memory and the human condition.
It's interesting how the novel circles back to that idea of Norwegian Wood.
Yeah.
The song, the title, and what it represents for Toru.
Yeah.
Early on, he describes the song as evoking this feeling of being lost in a forest, a sense of isolation and longing. But by the end, it feels like the meaning has shifted. It's still melancholic, but there's also a sense of acceptance,
Right.
of acknowledging the darkness while still reaching for the light.
Yeah, I think that shift reflects Toru's own journey throughout the novel.
Yeah.
He starts in a place of profound grief and confusion, lost in these memories of the past. But through his relationships with Naoko, Midori, and Reiko,
Yeah.
he slowly starts to find his way out of that darkness.
Right.
He learns to embrace the complexities of life, to acknowledge the pain without letting it totally consume him.
And while the novel is set in a specific time and place, 1960s Japan,
Right.
it deals with these very universal themes that I think resonate with readers across generations.
Yeah.
The challenges of finding your place in the world, navigating the ups and downs of relationships, coping with loss and grief. These are all experiences we can relate to.
Absolutely. And that's the hallmark of great literature, its
Yeah.
ability to transcend cultural boundaries and speak to the shared human experience.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Norwegian Wood,
Yeah.
what stood out to you the most?
For me, it's the novel's exploration of the healing power of human connection. Despite the profound loss and grief that kind of permeates the whole story, There's also this sense of hope that emerges through the relationships between these characters.
Yeah.
They find solace and support and a sense of belonging in each other, even in the darkest of times, you know?
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we're not meant to go through life alone.
Mm.
We need each other to navigate the complexities of life and find meaning and purpose.
That's such a powerful takeaway, and I think it really speaks to Murakami's ability to capture the nuances of human relationships,
Yeah.
the way we hurt each other, support each other, and ultimately help each other find our way.
Precisely. And Norwegian Wood is a beautiful testament to the enduring power of human connection, even in the face of profound loss and suffering.
As we conclude, I'd like to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If you had the chance to meet Toru Watanabe at the end of the novel, what advice would you offer him as he embarks on this new chapter with Midori?
Oh, wow.
What words of wisdom would you share about love, loss, and the journey ahead?
Perhaps I'd just echo Reiko's words. Be happy. Embrace the present moment. Cherish the connections you have. And remember that even when faced with uncertainty, there's always hope for a brighter future.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Norwegian Wood. We hope you enjoyed exploring this complex and moving novel with us. Until next time, happy reading.